So many of people in the FIRE movement use two rules, the 4% rule and the multiply by 25 rule, to calculate their freedom number and what their freedom's number is going to look like once they achieve FI.
Wait, what did you say?
The 4% rule was developed over 20 years ago. Is that really how we should be calculating a freedom number in 2020?
So wait, you said there's two rules that the FIRE movement's using?
The 4% rule and the multiply by 25 rule.
Okay.
They're related.
Gotcha. Well, and my name is Brandon, and this is Amanda, and we are with Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. And here's the thing. We were, I'm on in YouTube. I'm on a lot of other things, and I see a lot of videos or calculations. And the challenge is, people are going after financial independence, right? They want financial. I mean, who doesn't want financial independence? The challenge is there's so many variables that stop us from receiving financial independence. And we can be doing everything supposedly right, or what we think is right. But the reality is there's so many factors that can derail us. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is what are those factors that can derail even a person that's doing all of the quote unquote right things. And how do we change? How do we address that? What do we do to, have a buffer in case that happens, right? So anyway, how do you calculate your freedom number in 2020 is very different than how you calculate your freedom number in 1992.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there and let you pick it up.
Okay. I'm going to switch to sharing my screen. And first, we're going to go over the typical calculation for financial independence. And I'm going to start at the top left and work our way over for how we kind of look at this. So typically, people start with your annual expenses. How much do you need to cover all your expenses for your life? And a lot of people start there with their what they're doing right now, how much salary they have, that kind of thing. And then here's your 4% rule. This 4% rule, you'll notice I've got a little comment here. It assumes that whatever you're using to save in has a 7% annual rate of return and that we have 3% inflation. The idea being you can take out 4% and never eat into your principal so that you always have a nice sum there. So that's what they're saying is a safe withdrawal rate. And then here is where they do the rule of 25 and you do 25 times your annual expenses. That's your freedom independence number. So 25 times 50,000 is 1.25 million. Where they do the rule of 25. Brandon. Yeah. Here, this is just pointing right at that same FI number. Then you take what you've already saved and you can subtract that. If you're starting at 0, then you still got the same number. But let's say you've got 100,000, you can put that here. And now you only have to save 1.15 million. And then you put in your yearly savings. A lot of FIRE people try to save at least half of your income. And that's a goal that they shoot for. So here I did 20. If you're making 50,000 today, you save 25%. And then this calculates, it's going to take you 46 years to achieve financial independence. This one thing about here is that if you are getting a 7% annual rate of return, it could shorten the amount of time. But just to keep the math really simple, play it safe. This is literally if you take 25, if you take this 1.15 million, divide by 25,000, that's where you get 46 years, right? If you're only doing 100 or 10,000, it'd be 115 years, right? So you can play with this. I'm going to actually zero this back out because I want you to remember these numbers, because we're going to compare when we get to this other tab down here where we talk about reality. You can't see that because of the banner. I'm going to remove the banner real quick so you can see reality. We're going to get there. Because
before we get to reality, yep. Amanda, what I'd love is if you join the live, if you're here, put in your comments in the chat. And if you're in the live, or if you're if you're catching this on the replay on YouTube, so make sure you hit the subscribe and the bell. We really want to help as many people as we can break through to a smart, stable financial future. So help by making comments, sharing, and letting us know you're here.
Yeah, and
Commercial break over.
Yep, I would ask if this looks familiar to you. Put it in the comments. Say, yeah, I'm with you so far. This is exactly how I've seen a typical calculation for your freedom number, or what you need to fire, right? Now, if this is the assumption that you're going on, this is exactly what you're doing. Often people then talk about like how to shorten this amount of time, right? Maybe you don't need this much in annual expenses. Maybe you can increase your income so that you're able to save more. Maybe you find a way to get a windfall so that you can have more there. What this video is about is not how to get to your financial independence number faster. What I want to question is, how do you actually calculate your financial independence? And before I get to the different things that you need to calculate, I want to show you if you are following this typical calculation. And let's say the year 2000 was the year that you fired. That's when you reached your financial independence number. You had that 1.25 million. You decided to pursue your passions and continue from there, living off of the 4% of your 1.25 million. What would have happened? Because now we've got 19 years we can look back at, 20 years, sorry, from the year 2000. So I put that down here. What would have happened? So here we are, the year 2000. You start with your 1.25 million. You start withdrawing 4% of that. And then let's say you're in an ETF that's just following the S&P 500, but unlike an ETF, you're also getting dividends. So like this is mwah, like this is great. you feel like you're doing really good from the year 2000, like where your money is at. I want to give you a sneak peek, the average rate of return from the year 2000 to the year 2019 is 7.68%. So if you had a crystal ball and you knew at the beginning of the year 2000, you were for sure going to get 7.68% every single year going forward, or on average going forward, you'd feel like, okay, I'm set with my 4% rule. I'm actually going to do better, right? Adjust that 3% for inflation. I'm actually at 4.68%. So 4%, no problems here. But if you look, you'll notice what happens in actuality with, what the return has, what your balance ends up being. I used a really, really conservative 0.05% expense rate for whatever that ETF or wherever you're at is charging you. A lot do much more than that, but I want to give the benefit of the doubt. Let's say you're in a really low expense fund or something like that. You'll notice if you just follow the math down here, at the end of 2019, you're sitting there with only $250,000 and some change. What happened, right? You thought you had your 1.25 million and you're on average getting above 7% rate of return. Why did your fund go down? Shouldn't have actually gone up by about 0.68%. What happened? This is what we call the sequence of returns risk. The average doesn't actually matter. The real rate of return is what matters. And you'll notice it's never 7.68%. It's always higher or lower, right? The average actually never happens if you're just using, you add up and divide by the number of years, that kind of thing. And just to point out, when we're in the actual 2020, with what's happened with COVID-19, you would actually be sitting here with probably less than $250,000 in this account. And then if you follow that out, I just repeated the same thing, right? The same numbers here are the same numbers here. You would run out of money by 3 years from now, by 2022. You're gone. You thought your 1.25 million was going to last the rest of your life with your nice 4% withdrawal rate. But here, if you were age 55, that's a nice early retirement age. Maybe some people like to do it way before then, but then you'd be sitting here at 77, totally out of money, right? Who's going to hire you? How are you going to go get more income? You'd want to have a backup plan for sure. So that's kind of the problem, right? That's a major problem with how this calculation of financial dependence goes, is that the average return is not the real return. And so that's number one. If you get nothing else from this video, that's it. But there's more. Before I go to more, any questions, any comments? I'm going to go check the comments, see if there's anything happening. Brandon?
No comments yet, but I'm sure we're going to get some as you go into this. We do have a couple people in the live, and we're going to be doing these regularly. So this is going to be awesome. We really want to provide value. This is all unscripted, unedited. So we like doing these kind of videos. So, hey, join us. And again, if you like this stuff, hit the subscribe, and we want this interactive. So let's make it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at more. But wait, there's more. So on this reality tab, I want to scroll over here really quick. So we just talked about the sequence of return risk. Here's the other things that I want to ask about. The safe withdrawal rate. Is 4% really a safe withdrawal rate? Income tax, especially because what we just saw, right? Income taxes, that wasn't factored in before. Expense factor, right? That 0.05, could we try to factor that in and account for it when we're calculating our FI number? And inflation, could we do something, are we missing a big thing about inflation here? So now let me scroll on over. The first thing, we're going to go in the same kind of order, is this annual expense. If today you are 45 and you're planning to have financial independence at 55, and right now at 45 you live on 50,000, there's going to be inflation between now and when you're 55 years old, most likely, right? And historically, 3% inflation is kind of a number that gets thrown out. So if there is 3% inflation over the next 10 years, instead of 50,000, you're actually going to need, I put these numbers here, 1.48 times 50,000. So that's roughly going to be about 75,000 that you're going to need, not 50,000. So actually we could go in here and we could change this and say, this is going to equal 50,000 times 1.48. Is that what it was? 1.48? Yep. 74,000 instead of 50,000. But because I want to leave these numbers relatively the same as the last one, I'm going to bring that back down to 50,000. But then we've got, so that's inflation right off the bat. You got to think about how long until I reach financial independence, and what's inflation going to look like between now and then. Or am I going to be able to reduce my expenses by 24,000 over 10 years to account for that? Big thing there that's really important. Then taxes. So if you did have this in an ETF, you're going to at least have capital gains taxes. If it's in a 401k or an IRA that hasn't been taxed yet, you also got to think about personal income taxes. There's a lot of tax things here. You're going to want to talk to a tax expert about them. For our purposes, I use the 15% because if you're living off 59,000 or 50,000, you're going to have a 15% capital gains tax. So in order to cover that, I just put in that you're going to take out 59,000 to start for those 9,000 to make sure you're going to be able to cover any income tax that you have. And of course, long-term capital gains means you've held that stock, that ETF for long enough that it qualifies. And then this 2.8 withdrawal rate. Why did I put 2.8 instead of 4? It's because of this really smart economist guy named Wade Pfau, PhD. And Dr. Pfau has done a ton of research independent-wise to look at what are people actually seeing. And his conclusion was
Could you add, before you talk about his conclusion, Dr. Pfau isn't a doctor of like the body. Right. He's a doctor in retirement.
In economics, yeah. So he specializes in this area. He's got that PhD in this. So he's saying a 2.8% is a safe withdrawal rate in today's economic environment. His research has been published since the year 2000. I forget the exact year, and he's watching this and seeing what is really happening in today's climate with the stock market and the bond market and so forth. And I put a note here. If that is 2.8, you're still assuming if there's 3% inflation that you're going to get a 5.8% annual rate of return on average with these funds to make sure that you can still take out that 3% increase every year for inflation. So that's still, you're expecting a lot of the stock market there to get 5.8%. I know there's people out there that still believe you can get 12%, but in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion, is 5.8% actually something that you could do? Especially when you think about the expense factor too. So here, what I did to calculate this financial independence number is I started with 59,000, and then instead of just multiplying by 25, I multiplied by enough to make sure I could only take out 2.8% and also cover the 0.05% expense factor. And that actually gets me to 2 million, a little over 2 million instead of 1.25 million, like we saw on the typical. So it's $750,000 more, which of course, if we're not calculating any growth, is now 82 years with that same $25,000 per year being saved. Whereas before it was 50 years. So you just added 32 years by adjusting those three things: taxes, the safe withdrawal rate, and the expense factor. It's a pretty big difference. Again, you could try to make up that difference by decreasing your expenses, seeing if you have something already saved that you can leverage here, or saving more, right? But then let's see what happens if this is what we followed. So remember before on the typical, we ran out of money when we're 77. So these are the exact same calculations. Congratulations here with if you had 2 million and you're taking out the same amount of money, you actually have 2.2 million. Congratulations. That's really great. But you'll notice,
that's nice.
Yeah, it's showing this 2.8% works. But you'll notice you still run out of money when you're 91. And the average, or on average, a 65-year-old today has a 1 in 10 chance of making it to 95. And I don't know, if you're 45 today, you probably have a much likelier chance to make it to 95. But if you run out at age 91, how is that going to feel? Still having 4, maybe even more years with the, how science is doing, how much you're taking good care of yourself, I'm sure, all those kind of things. What are you going to do then, right? No one's going to hire. It would be really hard to find a job at 91. We'll just put it that way.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe there's somebody out there that's hiring 90-year-olds. But
by the time we're 91, I don't know. They already got rid of Walmart greeters. So we got to have robot. We'll fix the robot arms out of the greeters or something.
Yeah, or maybe robots will just replace all of the workforce and no one will have a job and we'll have some other solution. Who knows what the future holds in many, many years from now, right? So this looks like it's a pretty grim reality, right? First, you got to save $2 million instead of 1.25. Let's all just give up on fire now, right? No, that's not what it has to be. There's actually some really interesting ways you can strategize to make sure that you figure out the income tax thing, that you reduce expense factors by even less, to even less than 0.05. You figure out other places that you can have a much safer withdrawal rate, right? Even though the average rate of return here is 7.68%, and you're taking out 2.8%, you'll notice eventually you do still run out of money, right? And all I did was repeat the last 19 years again down here to get to see what would happen, right? If we just have an exact repeat. Of course, history is no prediction of future. What happened in the past is not really a prediction of the future. So we don't really know what's going to happen. There's all kinds of speculation of what could happen going forward. A big question to ask yourself is, do you really want to be at the beck and call of what happens going forward, right? And this is where I want to get to I think, number one thing to be thinking about so that you're not subject to the consequences of the math we see here. But before I share that number one thing to help you not be subject to those consequences of math, right, which doesn't change, math is math, any comments from Brandon or anybody else?
Well, I think what we hear is, I see a lot of people in the FIRE movement or in general wanting financial independence, and they're doing some smart things, right? But then they're not accounting for everything, and they are savers. They are people that live on less, right? That's a good thing, and all of that. So there is that, but then there's also that part of the unexpected and the other factors that jump in and we don't know. And that's where the grim reality is, in that even though you save, even though you do all the right things, there's so much and so many things that can block us. And
right.
Maybe my question is to everybody too, is what do you do different? How do we overcome that? Do we save all of our income? Is it 50% instead of 5 or whatever percent we put in our 401k? Is ETFs and all that, does that work? Anyway, those are just some things I come away with and saying, okay, are we personally on the right track? Do we need to have $5 million saved, even though we don't make that? How do we do that? And so that's something I think about a bit. And how do we help our clients at the same time?
Yeah. And you make a really good point with those major expenses, right? So I just did, I'm going back to the typical real quick. I just did a nice 3% pay raise each year to account for inflation. But let's say, your roof of your home needs to get repaired. And that just says, this year, and let's see, let me make parentheses in here to make sure the math works. Let's add a $20,000 expense to cover that roof. Now, all of a sudden, you're out of money. And when you're 69 instead of 77, because you had to replace your roof, which is something that's going to happen to every home at some point, is going to need its roof replaced. I haven't met a roof yet that has lasted forever, right?
How many roofs have you met?
At least the one on my house and every house that I've lived in before, right? Or you have to buy a new car because a car breaks down, or a major medical expense comes up. There could be all kinds of numbers of major expenses that we didn't even factor in here. So thanks for pointing that out, Brandon.
Well, and as I talk to some clients or people, sometimes they think, well, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to get cancer, or none of this is going to happen to me, so I don't have to prepare for that. And the reality is something will happen.
Yep.
Whether it's a roof, whether it's health, whether it's a hurricane, I don't know. Something happens.
Or something really great, right?
Oh, yeah.
You've got $2 million hanging out in an ETF, just in a brokerage account or something, and your kid's starting college. Guess what? You're probably going to have to pay extra on their college, and your $59,000 isn't going to cut it. That's an extra expense, right? So there could be all kinds of good and bad things that.
Yeah, that's why I think building passive income growth on that side is so important.
Right. Yeah.
All kinds of other streams of income, we need that.
Right. That's actually one of the ways that people get around, income taxes and safe withdrawal rates and expense factors and sequence of returns is they do things like buy property that gives them passive income or set up a business that they pass off management of to give them passive income. And yes, that's great, but you also don't know what's going to happen, right? That real estate, you could need to repair the roof there, or that the business environment could change and your business is closed for a few months. And so you have no passive income. I wonder when that's ever happened before, right? So you've got to have something that helps you as a strong, stable foundation to mitigate a bunch of these risks and a bunch of these things that are outside of your control, like taxes and expense factors and what
wait,
what
happens
in the market, the business and real estate. What?
Are you saying we can't control taxes?
Oh, no, we can't.
No.
We can a little bit, but not entirely, right? Congress does that, and we only get one vote.
Well, and that's why I like to ask in some of these, when we talk to clients, is asking again that question of, do we think taxes are going to go up or down in the future? And if it's deferred, we don't know the cost on that. That's another factor that we just don't know.
Yep. So I kind of alluded to, but let me show you how what we call a volatility buffer or a smart, stable foundation would work in this scenario. And I'm just going to change a couple things and you'll see what happens. So let's say
I'm going to move this to a big screen so you can see it.
So let's say you have this volatility buffer set up so that when the market goes down 37%,
it happens.
I mean, 2008, bam. Do we believe that 2008 could happen again? Absolutely, it could.
Is it happening now? We don't know.
But let's say you had a volatility buffer set up so that you did not have to touch your money that year. You got to just skip that year. So all I did was delete that, taking 74,000 out that year. And you'll notice the money lasts a couple extra years. Now, let's say that volatility buffer also helps you not take out any money when the market's down 22%. In this other major down year, you get to take it out of your volatility buffer instead. Boom, now you're up to 545,000 still when you're 94. That's the power of what we call a volatility buffer, right? Let me actually go back and just change. So I'm adding those two numbers back in. Okay. All I'm going to do is just remove the first one. I got pretty well just from that beginning one, because these early years are really critical. If you retire and you get some really big down years at the beginning, that throws a lot of things off. So I'm just going to delete 2 of those at the beginning now, and you'll see I'm back to that 500, even though I did take money out when the market was down here at -37. You're starting to see the power of a volatility buffer. And that's actually what Brandon and I specialize in, are these kinds of volatility buffers, so that you've set up something that you don't have to worry about. Again, a safe withdrawal rate, an expense factor, it's taxes. It really is a smart, stable foundation for a really awesome portfolio. Like, you'd be really great to have $2 million, right? And even if only a fraction of that was in this volatility buffer, like that would be okay, right? And so we like to ask questions of how much, like what percent do you want to be safe? And we follow your lead in what that looks like. I see Jimmy, Mr. Pollard, has put in a comment. Oh, I'm going to read it. I think your strongest suit is that you're not dogmatic. You're not preaching all insurance. Yeah, absolutely. It's about creating a portfolio. It's about, actually, one of our favorite people, his name is Bill. I was just reminded this week that he says, does having your money safe and liquid and accessible that you can use it and continue to grow even when you use it, does that take away any of your options? It really is a both and way of looking at how to build a portfolio. And I think that that's the way to go, right? It's not like we're fighting against other financial advisors or we're fighting against anything. We're saying, yeah, do that and make sure you're protecting yourself at the same time, and your family and your future and all those kind of things. Yes, and because I think the biggest fear for many Americans, and I've seen like some research that's backed this up, the biggest fear a lot of people have is outliving their money, right? And they get to this scenario when they're 91, or in this typical scenario when they're 77 and they run out of money and all they have is something like Social Security, right? And who knows how safe it's going to be when we're 77 or 91.
And I want to speak to the younger people right now, that think, well, I have time on my side. It's okay. I can put into that and it'll recover. It'll bounce back. Everybody says it'll bounce back. And maybe, yes, that's true. Hopefully, it goes insanely high. But what if it happens again and you're at 65, ready to retire? And this is happening to people right now who are saying, man, I wish I would have. Or that, and we're not saying don't do that. We're just saying protect against it as well, because then if it does happen, you're in a good spot. You're in a better spot, and you're able to maybe possibly even make more money when other people are retracting as opposed to the other way around. Yep. When it does come back and you didn't lose either, wouldn't it be great to make sure that you always win and you never lose? I think that's a powerful thing to think about. Let's create a game where we can always win. I'd want to rig that game.
Yeah. And I think that's actually one of the big things that the FIRE movement has, right, is accumulating a pile of money, a pile of assets that increase your chances of winning the game. We just have to be smart about where we're putting that and how we're making sure that we've diversified in more ways than one, right? Not just different kinds of stocks, not just different kinds of bonds or treasury bonds or, whatever, but we're truly choosing different types of financial vehicles, not just one or two.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to think about. It's all one wallet. All your money is all one wallet. And if it's all on the same truck and it goes off of a cliff, even though it's diversified portfolio in the market, maybe, right, or real estate, if that all goes down, then it's not really diversified, even though you had 10 houses.
Right. If you've got your money in different buckets, but all those buckets are on the back of the same truck, that's how the analogy goes, right?
Yeah.
I do want to share my screen again for a couple more things. One is if you want to talk about how to create your own volatility buffer, we love having those kinds of conversations. All you got to do, actually, if you go to grandmaswealthwisdom.com/start, it'll take you to this page where you can just schedule a quick 20-minute call. You can decide if you want to talk to me or to Brandon, and then share your information. We'll give you a call, answer some questions, talk about what our process looks like, and take it from there. And then also we have a webinar coming up tomorrow. For this one, you go to grandmaswealthwisdom.com/freedom, and it forwards you here to a page where you can learn about the webinar that we're doing. It's tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you're catching this after May 30th, you still can totally join us. We're going to hopefully be doing an encore. So still check back here and see what's happening. And here you just put in your email and your name and you can sign up so that you can join us for that. We're going to talk about this kind of three-pronged approach: strategizing, where you're thinking through how to get started and on that path; hacking, how do you make sure you're controlling your expenses, you're able to save more, all those kind of things. And then building, as life changes, how do you build on top? How do you get others engaged with you in the process? All that kind of thing. So we're going to be talking about what that looks like and how these things work together for your good. So again, that's grandmaswealthwisdom.com/freedom. Any concluding thoughts from you, Mr. Neely?
Well, with all of that, I know it can seem like it's a despairing place sometimes in managing our finances. And a lot of people will just say, all right, I'm gonna ignore it, or I'll just make a lot of money. And I think that we wanna be able to say, hey, how do you build a smart, stable foundation, still make a lot of money? I'm all for making a lot of money, but in case, I don't know what could happen to me tomorrow. How do we best position ourselves to take care of family, to take care of each other, to take care of ourselves? And so that's part of what we're doing with these webinars. Wealth is bigger than just money. So that's what we'll be talking about tomorrow. So join us tomorrow at, again, go to grandmaswealthwisdom.com/freedom. If you like these things, if you like any of this stuff, share it. We want to help as many people break through to a smart, stable financial future. That's our goal here at Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. That's all I got to say.
Okay. I thought of something as you were talking, but then I was so enraptured by what you were saying, I can't remember what it is.
I have that effect on you, I think.
I think so. Yeah, well, I'll just have to, if I remember it, we'll make sure it goes into a future video. We did release a couple other videos today on our YouTube channel. Maybe Brandon, you could put those in the comments. One is how much should I save? So as you're looking, when we're looking at that spreadsheet, your annual savings, how much should you save might be a question you're thinking of. Should it be 50% of your income? What does that look like? We've got a video we just published today.
Can you do a screen share of those on YouTube to show them?
Just put them in the comments. It would take me too long to get there. And then the other video that we shared today is, or posted earlier today, is Grandma's advice for the FIRE movement. So be sure to check out that video as well, where you get some nice time-tested wisdom from Grandma specific to what it means to have financial independence and retire early. That would be my recommendation for what to watch next. And of course, reach out to us, grandmaswealthwisdom.com/start. And we would love to chat with you. No obligation, no strings attached, just a nice, fun, hopefully, conversation. Get some of your questions answered and talk about what our process would look like and if we'd be a good fit to work together. We're not always a good fit, and we're totally upfront with telling people that. And that's really great. I think something we like to do. Great. Thanks. Brandon's putting those links in the chat now, or in the comments. So look in the comments for those. We'll try to update the description of the video too once this one's done, so you can see that. I'm actually going to go check out that description myself to see if there's anything else we missed.
Yeah. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. So it is 2020, right? Like, who knows what the future is going to hold? I'll leave with this thought. Here it is. So many people in 2020 have been saying, don't look at your balance. Whatever money you've got in the stock market, don't look at it. Things will change. We'll have this V-shaped recovery. Other people are saying it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. Be prepared for the long haul for those dominoes to start falling. We know 2020 has been such a roller coaster, right? From the threat of nuclear war to murder hornets, all kinds of things. Who knows?
What? Murder hornets?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about those.
Yeah. It's May 29th today, right? June is around the corner. Who knows what the summer is going to bring? And the biggest thing is to be thinking and questioning. And that's what we want to help you do. So I'll leave you with this idea that I heard from somebody that's not in the financial industry. He's actually a computer engineer. And he said this to me and a bunch of other people this week. And I just thought, this is it. Like, if more people thought about this, it would change a lot. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. So here's what he said. He said, so when you go to the most financial professionals, and you don't have a lot of money, they'll tell you you've got to take a lot of risk, because if you want to accumulate a lot of money, you're going to have to take a lot of risk in order to have that big rate of return and have a big pile. And then let's say a person with a lot of money goes to that same financial professional. Guess what they're going to tell them? You should take risk. Like, you've got this big pile of money, you can afford to take some risk, right? If that's what you're hearing is risk, no risk, no reward. You got to in order to accumulate, you've got to speculate, those kind of things. That's what everyone's saying. And you've got to wonder, if that's what everyone's saying and everyone's hearing, regardless of their financial position, would it maybe be the person saying it that's looking out for their own interests rather than putting together unique strategies for someone else's interest, right? That's the kind of questioning we like to do here with Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. We think that's what our grandparents would be wondering about, what's happening currently with where the financial sector has gone over the past 30 plus years. And that brings me a lot of joy to ask those kind of questions and to be skeptical that way. So if you are a skeptical person, we're your people. We're the skeptics too. And we love to talk and have some fun asking questions together and getting to know one another and finding out what is the truth for your financial future, right? That'll build that smart, stable path forward that truly is unique for you and isn't something that, anyone else could hear for themselves, right?
And to be fair, we are risk takers. We started a business, brick and mortar business, our first one, and people were saying, "You're crazy. Are you sure you want to take that risk?" And we were, yeah, it's going to make it, because we put everything into something that we could control. We worked really hard for it, but I think, yes, risk in things that you understand and know too.
Yeah. Yep. So, okay. We'll leave it with that. And we'll look forward next Friday, same time, or actually an earlier time. We're a little late today because we're at a virtual conference, but same place. Be sure you like and follow our page if you're catching this on Facebook, or be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you're watching this on YouTube so that you always catch future videos. And don't forget grandmaswealthwisdom.com/start to get started and have a conversation. We'd love to talk.
And again, we want to help you take charge of your cash flow, leverage your assets, and break through to a smart, stable financial future.
Peace.